Digital is the norm. The growth of the platforms and the strength of the algorithms. For any marketer, whether you're in a big brand or a small brand, these are the fundamental kind of tectonic shifts that are going to inform the next 10 years. Data starts to become important, and not just data, but application of data.
As everyone is being admitted, welcome to the Fireside Chat edition virtually with the Retail, Luxury and Consumer Club. We've got here is Murray Bisschop. So he is the Global Marketing Communications Director for Tesco. And obviously, I think everybody on this call is familiar with Tesco, as it's one of the most valuable brands in the UK and the leading grocery retailer for the country that most of us are residing in here. Murray has spent 15 years in various different roles across Unilever as well as Tesco. And since then, he has led the own brands team and really managing those in-house venture teams as well as the global marketing communications. So we're really excited to hear all about your vast experiences in the consumer and retail space, Murray, today. John Radcliffe is also on the line and will be moderating and probing questions to Murray. And he has a long-standing relationships with London Business School. He's guest lectured and organized these lecture series through various different clubs, tech and media, marketing and strategy, and with us at Retail Luxury since 2009. He is the founder and CEO of Engage Video Group, and we are so grateful for his partnership with these various different fireside chats. So with that being said, now I will hand it over to you, John and Murray. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Claire, thank you so much. It's such a great introduction there, and thank you so much for hosting us. And Murray, thank you so much for joining us. So excited to be chatting to you today. A fellow South African, which is always exciting on these. And yeah, it's such a remarkable journey, Murray. Such remarkable companies, and definitely amongst the noteworthy companies of our time at Unilever and at Tesco's. And yeah, just so excited to hear your story today. And maybe a great place to start, Murray, is just to dive into your career journey. And maybe if you could start talking a little bit about your career journey, which brings you to your role today.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Genuinely the highlight of my week. So yeah, looking forward to talking to you all. Yeah, so well, look, first thing I'd say, my career probably hasn't planned out the way I expected, in a good way. So I joined Unilever on the graduate scheme in South Africa. So as John says, I'm South African. Joined Unilever in South Africa, spent about 5 years there. Then got the opportunity to move across to the UK on a kind of like a 3-year secondment, which has turned into 18 years. Kind of one thing led to another, but got to work in the Unilever UK business for about 5 years, and then ran some global brands out of London. And then, you know, really happy at Unilever and loved the business, loved the purpose. And unexpectedly, an opportunity came up at Tesco, and kind of the rest is history from that point, from sort of 2016, 2017 onwards. And as you mentioned, Claire, I've had a couple of roles sort of through the Tesco system. So looking after our own brand portfolio, which is about half of our sales, setting up a small venture office within Tesco, and now looking after what we call marketing communications, which is it's sort of effectively our content and advertising. So I mean, for someone who studied economics and thought I'd kind of go back and work on the family farm, I think probably not where I thought I'd be 20 years on, but it's been a wild ride, one that I continue to learn from every day, and genuinely just feel lucky to have worked with some pretty special people along the way.
Oh, what a remarkable journey, Murray, and thank you for sharing. You know, it's so interesting being outside of organizations like Tesco's and hearing titles and roles, specifically looking at organizations and potential futures and career journeys. It'd be great just to understand the core objectives of your current role and your team as it applies to Tesco.
Yeah, so look, I lead the team that effectively is the voice of Tesco. So any communication that we put out to customers, whether it be kind of paid advertising, owned content, whether it's our kind of engagement platforms like Tesco Real Food, or whether it's our PR and social activities or in-store shop, or anything you see in a store, basically, comes through the team that I lead. And so it's quite broad. It's got a lot of kind of the old analog elements of like printing cardboard in stores, which we're trying to do less of, but we still do. And all media, from kind of performance right through to kind of TV and above the line.
Fantastic, Murray. As I listened to you there, when Claire introduced you, we just spoke about the size of the Tesco brand and the sort of love which the Tesco brand has for it. One of the fascinating things I often think about is when you have such a significant brand, and a brand which means so much to so many different people, building those brands and investing in those brands is obviously core to the future growth of the company. I'd be fascinated to understand from your point of view what you feel is core in building the Tesco brand today.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. When I joined in 2016, some of you may recall Tesco had just been through quite a major kind of crisis, really. So we'd had an issue around horse meat in 2014, where horse meat was found in some products. Interestingly, found in other retailer products at the time, but Tesco, being the kind of lightning rod for the market, took a lot of the kind of negative press around that, and that really hit the brand, and then went into kind of a quite significant financial crisis in 2015. And so with a new CEO, we essentially had to rebuild the brand. So our brand trust metrics had really got to a low point, and our net promoter score was negative at the time. And so I think we were very deliberate from 2016 onwards to make sure that it wasn't about what we said, it was about what we did, right? And so our mantra at the time was kind of it was about the acts, not the communication, and we had to behave our way out of that situation, and that was really all about going back to the fundamentals of understanding our customers' needs, meeting those needs, as opposed to selling, and doing that in a way and with a culture that lived up to the values that we expected. And that was basically the premise from 2016 onwards, was to kind of, it's quite humbling to be in that position. You have to get back to basics, understand what your customers want, work really hard every day, make sure you treat your colleagues as well as you treat your customers, and start building back very slowly. And then that gets to a point where you can start talking about what you're doing, but you need to really earn that right first. So we, probably took us a good couple of years before we felt we were in a position to probably shout a bit more about the things we were doing and the quality of our food and things like that. But it was definitely a case of behaving our way out of a crisis as opposed to kind of talking our way out of it.
That's fascinating, Murray. As I think and listen to you there, I sort of think about how much the world of marketing has changed since the start of our careers. And, it's sort of 20 years ago, I guess you had to get TV right. If you got TV right, almost nothing else really mattered.
Yeah,
but you had to get TV right, you had to get print right, radio, maybe outdoor. And today it just feels so different. And as you look to communicate with, the millions of people in the UK and elsewhere, it just feels like such a different marketing mix today. And I'd be fascinated to understand, as you think about marketing and communicating with audiences, how that's changed over the last few years.
It's unrecognizable from 10 years ago, almost unrecognizable from 5 years ago, right? And what I think the big shifts now aren't kind of analog to digital. Digital is the norm. We have some kind of legacy analog channels that we still operate in because they're good value, but I think the biggest shifts now are within digital, right? And the deprecation of cookies, the growth of the platforms and the strength of the algorithms. And I think this is for any marketer, whether you're in a big brand or a small brand, these are the fundamental kind of tectonic shifts that are going to inform the next 10 years. And I think it probably, in a good way, I think it really levels the playing field. The stronger the platforms get, the stronger the algorithms get. Arguably, there's less advantage to be gained by just spending big. You can't necessarily always beat the algorithm. And so I think data starts to become important, and not just data, but application of data and first-party data and the responsible use of that data. And I think probably the bigger businesses that do well over time will be the ones that can really responsibly manage that data, responsibly use that data in a way that leverages the platform algorithms and in a cookieless world. They'll be the businesses that do well, and I think that means a lot of small businesses will be a lot quicker to do that and will probably reap some benefits over time, which is is arguably a good thing.
That's fascinating. As I listen to you there, I just think about how, many jobs out there, when you start the job, it's quite similar to what you started 5 years later, but it does feel like marketing more so than most. Every day you go in, something's changed very slightly, and when you compound that growth, it really is a different job. One of the things which often strikes me is how tricky it must be to keep up. And I'd be fascinated to understand how, with such a big organization, with so much communication out in the world, how you manage to keep up and feel like you have a competitive edge against all the other organizations which you compete against.
Yeah, it is really tough individually, but then also collectively as an organization, right? And so I think there are a few things. One is at an individual level, you have to instill in colleagues and teammates a hunger to stay abreast of what's happening. I think what's also probably changed from certainly when I early in my career is the kind of decentralization of decision making. So what we're finding is in the past, perhaps one marketing director would have stood over an entire campaign and signed off every element of copy. But I think now, because the channels are so fragmented, and because the specialisms in those channels are quite specific, we have to trust the experts. And so if we've got a paid search team standing over a piece of work, I'm never going to know as much as they know, and we have to trust them. We have to get up to a fundamental level of understanding, but beyond that, we have to trust the experts in every channel to know their stuff and do a fantastic job. And that comes back to people and making sure you've got the right people and the right culture, and you can give that trust, and you can know that they will do not only the right thing, but will be competitive in the market. And so it is. I think it's a fundamentally different model to perhaps some of the command and control brand teams that you perhaps saw 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So if you get your people right and that culture of sort of accepting that the decisions and the sort of like thinking comes from the base, then you get it right. It's really interesting. I remember sort of early on in my sort of career journey, we used to speak a lot about channel marketing mixes and how you needed to show up a bit here, a bit there, a bit here. But I think in today's world, often there are some things which just seem to work really, really well. And I'd be intrigued to understand if anything springs to mind under the heading of marketing, which is working really well in 2024. Stuff when you look at it, you're like, wow, we're really getting that right. I don't know if anything does spring to mind under that heading.
So I think we quite hard on ourselves, right? So I don't think we try not to sit here and go, we're getting anything right, because the moment you do that, someone will do it better than you, and so you've got to stay hungry and really keep pushing yourself. I think there've been moments when we've done well. So I think probably 18 months ago, when we were really getting into TikTok, we had a few campaigns that went viral, and the kind of partners like they genuinely did, and the team did a fantastic job on tapping into popular culture on things like the Tesco meal deal and bits that really are kind of in the fabric of the nation, and that did well. Now we've got to keep moving with that. I think we're making a lot of progress at the moment on retail media and how we monetize some of our media channels. But again, that will move very quickly, and we'll need to stay abreast of that and keep pushing. So look, I think we're stepping into the channels as they develop. We're having some successes, but retail is such a fast-moving game. If you can't rest on your laurels for a moment. So we keep pushing.
That's fascinating. I was chatting to a brand, a marketing director yesterday, who was saying that more than 50% of their spend currently is in social media. And we were just talking about, the scale of social media. And if you split out social video, how big it is, and you spoke about TikTok there. But if you just take the TikTok plus Reels on Facebook and Instagram plus, YouTube Shorts, it is objectively the biggest media channel in the world today, the sort of social vertical on your phone media channel, and the number way to reach audiences. And it's amazing how quickly that's happened, where 5 years ago it was part of a channel mix, but today it feels like one of the pieces which is most noteworthy. As you as an organization look at TikTok and the different video platforms, how do you sort of look to get it right? And you spoke a little bit about the way you leaned into popular culture in the past, but any sort of thoughts around how to ensure that over the long term, that culture of within the organization leads to the right sort of successes on those platforms?
Yeah, so look, the first thing I'd say is you're absolutely right. So the platforms are taking off. Overall, what that's leading to is increased consumption of AV, right? So overall, as a nation in the UK, we are consuming more screen time, whether it be across TV, across small screens, across the board. We're also doing that increasingly differently in a more fragmented way. So that picture that used to be kind of predominantly TV is now more split across channels, but then more fragmented as you get down into whatever segmentation you want to look at, right? So that'd be the first thing I'd say is there is more AV being consumed in exponentially more different ways. And so what that leads to for us is trying to isolate much smaller target audiences, trying to talk to people kind of more and more on an individual level, or as close to that as we can get, and serve up the relevant content, advertising, help, support that we're trying to do. So I think it's probably less and less of the big set pieces that we kind of the campaigns that you probably had traditionally, and a lot more always on focused messaging around key audiences and key messages. And for a brand like us that's such a broad church, we have multiple messages that we're trying to land with different audiences at any given time. And so I think it lends itself to that. But again, as you say, you have to trust your teams, and you have to be able to hand over accountability to teams to just crack on. And we're very lucky in that we have a phenomenal team who are doing a superb job with it.
Great to hear, Murray. You spoke earlier about your time at Unilever, and you touched on purpose when you spoke about Unilever. And Unilever over time has sort of obviously really stood for purpose attached to brands. And I see a lot of that within Tesco's as well. I'm just interested, given your role, what your sort of perspective is on the power of purpose within brands and where it can work really well for growth.
It's a big question. I think fundamentally, purpose is a good thing, right? It's basically just people trying to do the right thing, and like, what's not to love about that? So of course it's a good thing. I think probably where and we've seen it over the last couple of years, where there's been a bit of pushback on some of the purpose-led stuff. I think it's where it trips into it not being fundamental and real, and so I think like a purpose-led brand is a brand that will do it anyway, even if no one's going to know about it. And so for that reason, we kind of try to separate purpose with communication. Like, so we'll communicate and talk to people about their needs. And if a certain group's need is to buy a purpose or plant-based, for example, because they believe in sustainability and they believe it's more sustainable, of course we'll talk to them about that, but we'll base that on their needs, right? I think probably where you trip into issues is where you're talking about purpose for the sake of purpose, and that purpose isn't fundamental to your organization. So I think that's probably what we'll see over the next couple of years is businesses that are just fundamentally rooted in purpose will come out well. I think brands that try to put a veneer of purpose on the edges and try to just talk about it, I suspect will at some point you'll get rumbled, because there's no hiding from what you do behind the scenes. And I think the other thing is probably purpose isn't always like sexy, right? Like sometimes it's just kind of very day-to-day businesses that do an amazing job in some particular regard for either their colleagues or their customers. So yeah, Timpsons, I think, which is a kind of a locksmith in the UK, are a brilliant example. They don't shout about it, but they have an incredible fundamental culture around how they support their staff and who they employ and what they do for their staff. And it's not a big deal. It's not part of their advertising campaigns, but it's just who they are. And so I think they're probably, a business that we could all learn from in terms of just doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We had Paul Polman on the speaker series a couple of months ago, and I think exactly what you said there was almost identical to what he said. And he spoke about when he joined and was the CEO of Unilever. He sort of spent a lot of time trying to understand what led to all the brands which lived within the Unilever stable. And he spoke about how, the function of a soap was very purpose driven because it reduced sort of like infant mortality. It's sort of like right at the core of of the product was the purpose. And I think exactly what you're saying there rang very true to what he was saying. I've got a question here from Michael Kruger, and obviously a really interesting one at the moment is AI, and the question is just your experience of AI enhancing customer journeys, CS, marketing purposes, etc. It's such an interesting one because from sort of our point of view, these new things arrive, and obviously AI is a huge part of the future. But it'd just be fascinating to understand, like right now, whether there is any sort of immediate real value you see, or whether you think it's still in the future.
No, so I think there's loads of value, and I think as ever with any like nascent technology, there'll be some things that don't go the distance and some things that do, and then there'll be other things that we didn't dream of that we'll use it for. And right now, we see and we're using AI, and I guess from probably more of a back-end productivity perspective, right? So it's to help us, whether it be fundamentally in terms of phasing our stock or forecasting or helping our colleagues be more efficient. We're also using it at a low level in some of our creative to try and enhance kind of human creative. We are cautiously taking kind of one step at a time in terms of getting into real broad-based generative AI, and I think I suspect it will come to some degree. We just want to kind of test and learn and build out our knowledge and understand the implications as we move more into that space. So so I'd say some use on the kind of internal back end to make us more productive, and then starting to dip our toe in the water to understand on the front end on a more kind of generative level how we use it for marketing.
That's fascinating, Murray. As I sort of listened to you today, a lot of the themes which have come up have been around sort of getting the right teams in place, getting the right culture in place to allow the great thinking to emerge. As I think about your role, I have to assume that a really big part of it is leading teams in a great way and sort of building a great team. Be fascinated to understand your sort of point of view on leadership, on managing teams, on getting the best from teams. Yeah, it'd be great to hear your thoughts.
So look, firstly, I think I've been very lucky in the leadership that I've sort of experienced and the people I've worked for in my journey. So a person I kind of came across to join really at Tesco was a guy called Dave Lewis, who was previously worked for at Unilever. And I think for me, he's an example of really good leadership in that he's incredibly clear, incredibly demanding, but also very values-led, has high integrity, and is in his own way very empathetic and caring. And so you get this sense of a real need for high performance and clarity on where you're going, but also you feel looked after, and you trust that the decisions he's making or leading for are made trying to do the right thing. And so I think that gives you a sense of, I need to do well, but I need to do it properly, and I need to do the right thing. And I think as I've led teams of various sizes, I've probably mostly tried to take what I've learned from good leaders like him and just reapply it. And so I say to my team, you only need to be two things to work in our team. and that's good and nice, right? So what we mean by that is you need to be good at what you do. So excellence is something we drive for, and we set a really high standard. But we also demand that you're a decent person as you go about that. And I think that's for two reasons. One is I just don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think high performance and not being a nice person need to go hand in hand. I think you can achieve both. And in fact, I think it's probably more sustainable. And then selfishly, it's just the kind of place that I want to turn up and work in an environment where there are nice people who I enjoy being around, and enjoy spending what can be, quite long weeks with, but also doing well and being competitive at the same time. And so that's the kind of balance that we try and lead for in our team is be good, be nice, right? And we call it excellence with empathy, or we kind of, it turns up in different ways, but it's really trying to kind of marry those two things.
Well, it's fascinating to listen to, Murray, and I definitely know on my journey, I think the more of this you look into, the more power you see in sort of like great leadership. And you often see it with these big organizations where, if a great leader replaces not such a great leader, they can turn around, and there've obviously been great books written about it. But that's just such fascinating stuff to hear, and really liked hearing about your leader. The clear, demanding, values-led leadership just sounds like such a great form of leadership. We've got a question here from Andre Redlinghausen, and I'm just going to read it. It feels like it's getting harder to get attention with people glued to their phones. To what degree are you and Tesco leveraging the retail environment as a communication medium to grow your brand, but also to potentially serve as a revenue source?
Yeah, so it's a very topical question. And the answer is significantly, and we will continue to do so. So attention is becoming more difficult. By the way, that's regardless of where you are. That's if you're in the retail environment or outside of it. But what we do have is we have high traffic and high consideration. So you have anything up to 3/4 of the UK population coming through one of our stores in a sort of a 3-month time frame. So that in itself is an opportunity, both from kind of driving our brand, but also, as you say, from a monetization point of view. And both of those have to be priorities for us. The first and driving our brand, because you want them to come back, right? And you want to reinforce what hopefully is a positive experience. So if you walked into a store and you pick up your fruit and it's fresh and it's at a good price and staff are friendly and you walk out feeling positive, hopefully the communication that comes around that will reinforce and remind you of that, and perhaps you get a coupon to come back and get 10% off the next time you want to buy the same thing. But at the same time, all of that, as you all know, is a famously low margin industry, right? So retail, as it is, to provide that service, to provide that fresh food quality, to provide all of end to end what retail does, typically looking at low single digit margins, right? And so to enable that to continue and to make our businesses sustainable, media is far higher margin, right? And so it is attractive to not just us, but all retailers. And it's well documented that retail media will be, I suspect, in the UK, in most markets, a key driver of kind of sustainability and future profit growth for just about any grocer.
Thanks, Murray. Great answer there. You spoke a little bit about culture earlier, and I think what's interesting about your career journey is, of course, that you've worked at companies renowned for culture and with very different cultures, I would have thought. Just interested to understand your point of view of the power of culture, getting it right within companies, and then the difference between the culture within a Unilever and a Tesco's, and where you see that showing up positively for each of them.
Yeah, so again, I feel lucky to have worked in businesses that have got good cultures. I think the first thing I'd say is kind of you can trip into a space where you think culture is it's the stuff that's written on the walls, or it's the training courses that you go on and that you get inducted on, and that's part of it, and that's important. And we have some fundamental beliefs as a Tesco business, and some behaviors that we all work towards. But in my experience, though, culture's it's a far softer thing. It's not about the big set pieces. It's how you behave when things aren't going well. It's the corridor conversations. It's how your leaders behave, because that behavior is emulated. And so if you go into the board with bad news, their reaction to that will be how other leaders react, and that trickles down. And so I think it's that kind of that softer holding yourself to the standards of behavior that you want to see, that's more fundamental for me. And so we have both. We have clear training and clear behaviors, and we measure it rigorously as a business, and we do track where we are. For me personally, it's more of a intangible. It's what I experience, and do I feel like I'm in the right place as a result. And so far it's been very positive in Tesco, and I feel like I've been able to make a contribution to that culture. And ultimately I think for my team, what we would talk about as good culture is, how do people feel on a Sunday night? Are you looking forward to coming into work? And if that starts to tip, and sometimes it does, because people have been working flat out for 6 months, and they just absolutely out on their feet, and then we need to sit up and listen, and we need to make some changes, right? So I think you've got to look at the hard metrics. You've also got to try and keep a handle on the kind of the softer, less tangible stuff. But to answer your question, the difference between Tesco and Unilever, I would caveat it with, I was at Unilever a long time ago, and I think it's changed substantially, and this is just my experience. I think both cultures are fundamentally good, nice people trying to do the right thing, which is that's a prerequisite for me. I wouldn't want to work in a business that's not that. I think probably the way I describe the difference is, I think when I worked in Unilever, there was a kind of a mad rush at the end of every quarter to try and deliver the numbers. So you'd have 2-3 days of absolute kind of focus on performance and how many cases we'd sold, and it was just this huge focus on getting over the line for the quarter. Whereas I'd say in retail, every day is like that. So it's literally a relentless kind of focus on, how are yesterday's numbers? What do we need to do? Are we meeting customers' needs? Are we serving them correctly? What's our on-shelf availability? What's our pricing? Are we getting the right comms out? So it's quite relentless in that sense. And I think that breeds a sense of, at best, quick reactions and like laser focus on how customers are feeling. At worst, you can get into action for action's sake, and you have to kind of temper those two, and make sure that action in and of itself isn't always the answer. Sometimes you've got to stop and figure out what you're trying to do. So yeah, those would probably be the two differences. My understanding is probably from 2016 onwards, the culture at Tesco has been very different to perhaps what it was previously. But yeah, I wasn't here, so I don't know that firsthand.
That makes sense, Murray. Thank you. We've got a lot of sort of people studying at the moment on the call, and I guess one of the big things to think about is just what the next step is in a career journey. It'll be fascinating to understand from your point of view what you think the great parts of a role in marketing and communications are, and perhaps what the challenging parts are too.
So look, I think it has changed, and it will continue to change. I think for me, the best part is if you're in a business that believes in it, you're going to be closest to the customer, whatever that customer is, right? Whether it's B2B or B2C. And so for me, that's where my interest was piqued originally, is just trying to understand why people do things, and what motivates them, and how do they feel about things. And I think if that fundamentally interests you, then it's probably a good space to be. Now the shape of that will change, right? And you'll lean a lot more on algorithms to understand that in the future than perhaps market research or the way we used to do it. So I think if you have that fundamental curiosity, it's probably the right place to be. I think alongside that, as with any of us in the industry, you just have to be open to kind of constantly evolving as the new way of talking to customers and communicating your brand to customers evolves, and it'll continue to do that. I think you just have to be up for continually learning, and you probably won't get to a point in your career where like you've got it all licked, because something will happen next week that'll be new, that you'll need to learn and change your skill set on.
That's brilliant, Murray. Thank you. As I was listening to you there, I was just thinking about, we have a whole, as I say, a whole group of students on the call. If you were restarting your career, so it's 2024, Murray's starting his career journey, where do you think you would go knocking on the door? Where would you try really hard to get into? What kind of organization?
So I think I would definitely I think I'd still be attracted to marketing for the reasons I mentioned. I think probably the people who I find quite interesting at the moment are some of the pure play e-commerce retailers. I think I would certainly be in a space, or try and get into a space rather, where I probably understood more of the fundamentals around the data and the science behind it. That's probably an area where I'm, if I could go back 10 years and really understand, I'll probably never get to the level of understanding I'd like on that. But I think I think if you can truly understand the science behind the data and at least at have a working knowledge of algorithms and how to influence that, I think it's hugely beneficial. So I think the stronger you can be in that space, the better. That's probably where I'd head. And then if I was lucky enough to have a choice, I'd try and find that in a business that, as I say, had people in it that I thought had the right values and were trying to do the right thing.
Fantastic, Murray. Thank you. Thank you for the share there. I see a question here from Declan Hollywood. I'm going to read it. So, is marketing becoming more measurable? Your point of view, how do you manage the ROI question that is inevitably asked in the boardroom and at exco level?
Yeah. So the short answer to that is yes and no, I'd say. My experience is becoming individually more measurable, collectively less attributable. So what we're finding is as this fragmentation happens, what you can do is you can measure brilliantly each individual element, but getting a clear line of sight and comparison across those measures in a kind of comparing apples for apples way is hard, right? And particularly where someone might have touch points across multiple platforms, to try and then get attribution back to which is the one that's had the biggest impact is very difficult, right? So yes, I think we have loads of data. I think getting kind of true insight and making decisions with that data it still requires some interpretation and some work and again, just good people, right? Where we've got good people looking at the data who are able to put it into context and interpret it, we make good decisions. Where we don't do that, and where we don't have a kind of a clear, good judgment over that data, you can be led into a false sense of security with numbers that look great but actually aren't truly delivering for you.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. That's fascinating, Murray. And I think that makes so much sense. I think in my journey, I think there is so much data out there, and I think it really is the interpretation and looking through it to find where the value is, which is the hard part. We've got a question here from Catherine Neal, and she said, "I'd love to know what you and your team value in working with partners and marketing agencies, and how can a partner agency impress you when they're working with you?"
That's a very good question, and it's a question that we talk about and ask ourselves all the time. So the first thing I'd say is I think it depends on what role that agency is or that partner is playing. But probably two or three fundamentals. One is we would always look for people who share our values, and so the way we behave, the way we engage with, the environment we're in. I would never want my team to be in an environment that I wouldn't be comfortable with. So that's almost like a hygiene factor, right? So that's a basic entry point. I think once you've got that, you want clearly a at least very credible, at best kind of best in class in their specific field, and we choose that usually on kind of technical criteria, I guess, or creatively perhaps it's a bit more subjective, but you would make a kind of a functional choice based on who you think is doing a good job in that space. And then when you're in that relationship, I think what you're looking for is a good level of challenge, actually. So you're partnering with people because they're the experts, and our partners know more about their space than we do, and so we always go into it with a very equal relationship in mind. It's not a kind of a tell and deploy kind of relationship. It's a two-way street where we are open to being pushed if we're not getting elements and inputs on our side right, but equally we demand a high level of performance and outputs from our partners. So hopefully that leads to, again, high performance, but in an environment where people can be themselves, can feel like they're fulfilled, but challenged in a constructive and positive way.
That makes a lot of sense, Murray. Thanks for the share there. We have another question here from Jamie Neal, and she said, "Yeah, if you had to pick one thing, what would be the favorite part of your job?"
The people team bits of it, so developing the team, building talent pipelines, seeing like good people come in, work hard, do well, progress. It's like, yeah, that's it's the most rewarding bit. I genuinely, and that bit stays constant, right? So marketing can evolve and change and will be completely different in 5 years' time. But I think people coming in, trying to do well, progressing, developing, that stays constant.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about the power of leaders to have impact in the lives of their teams. And I think as you sort of develop your own purpose, as your career progresses, certainly for myself, it's felt very much like that from day to day, it just becomes more apparent that the real value is the impact you can have in people's lives. And so, yeah, just amazing to hear you talk to that, Murray. And we got maybe time for one last question. And I got one here from Sandra just saying, having a look at everything happening in TikTok at the moment and the work you've done and other brands have done, who do you think is getting it really right out there? Are there any examples which sort of you feel are great examples of people really excelling in that space?
Good question. Again, I'd say the people who've got it right at times. I struggle to think of someone who I'd say is like from start to finish over the last, let's say, 2 years has been consistently leading the way on TikTok, or perhaps has been there throughout. But at times some of our competitors have done a very good job. So Little and Aldi have had a lovely tone and been quite cheeky, but we've got a lot of cut through. So we've looked at that very closely and respect that work. I think they've done very well. So I think at times some of our competitors have done a good job, and that's made us double down and work harder to try and match that. I think brands like Specsavers have got a lovely tone and managed to get quite good uptake without a lot of paid behind them, just by being true. That's a power of a strong brand platform, right? So I'd say probably they've been quite consistent in getting kind of not mega but good sustained organic reach, just through like a really smart use of kind of should have gone Specsavers, a really simple idea. So that's probably a good example of someone who's been simple, consistent, used their brand positioning, and had, I'd say, sustained success on TikTok, but then just across social.
Murray, thank you so much. I just want to be respectful of your time, and it's been such a great session to chat with you today. And thank you so much for the time you have given us. I think just listening to obviously your focus on leadership and building culture within teams for success feels like a really strong outtake for me, and I'm sure the audience today too. So yeah, I just wanted to say a really big high five and a big thank you for all your time you've given us today. And thank you to everyone who joined too. And yeah, I think just have a great week, everyone, and thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.